The Tar Heels are in the final grouping for Kentucky big man transfer Ugonna Onyenso. Has Hubert Davis finally found his big man?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Thursday, May 16th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shea, joined today by our guy, Coach Bill Robinson, the head coach of the Milligan University men's basketball team. And you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. Want to send a special shout out to all of you everydayers, along with all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. We're so glad you're all here. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. Coming up on the show today, we're going to talk Ugonna Onyenso. We really haven't, but with Carolina being in his last couple schools that he's looking at, if he comes back to school out of the draft, thought it would be important for us to talk about. Coach Rob and I are also going to have a conversation about, hey, the options here in the front court are getting thin in the transfer portal. Are we at a stage now where J-Wash is going to play more and have a bigger role than maybe we thought? We'll talk about that. And we got to have some story time with Coach Rob, baby. It's mid-May. We're getting close to camp. For those of you who don't know, Coach Rob is a 2-decade veteran of Carolina summer basketball camp and just has so many great stories from that, which he's writing a book on. And so we'll do that, as well as celebrate another hurdle that the men's golf team has crossed on their way to pursuing a national championship. So, Coach, let's dive right into this thing. Ugonna Onyenso, Kentucky transfer, has played 2 years, so he's got 2 years remaining. Some interesting reporting that's not all completely lining up about where he's at with what schools are still in the mix. According to Adam Zagoria, it was Carolina, Alabama, Louisville, Oklahoma, Mississippi State, Georgetown. Joe Tipton on Wednesday morning had the other 5, but no Georgetown. Wednesday afternoon, a guy named Rob Reinert said it was down to Bama, Louisville, and North Carolina. Adam Zagoria came back and said, hey, I talked to Onyenso's mentor, and that ain't it. In fact, it's those 6 schools I had talked about, plus K-State's also in the mix. So, Coach, all that to say, Carolina's in the mix, and that's all we need to know for right now. Also, Zagoria says, and this is critical because we don't know for sure that Onyenso will come back to college, but Zagoria says, quote, his pro day is set for Thursday in Chicago, and 18 NBA scouts are confirmed. His focus remains there, meaning the draft, although he is not yet signed with an agent. So, Coach, let's have our conversation today in the assumption that Ugonna Onyenso does ultimately come back to school. Last week, you and I talked about Ven-Allen Lubin, Coleman Hawkins, and Dylan Mitchell. I haven't heard anything on Dylan Mitchell, but both Lubin and Hawkins, seems like Carolina is in conversations with them and or their camps, along with Ugonna Onyenso. Coach, again, we haven't talked about Onyenso yet. As you watch him, as you think about what Carolina has and what they need, does he fill a role of need?
I think he's a very special talent. He's very different than anything that they have right now. He's a shot blocker long. He runs the floor great. I mean, he's a gazelle out there, gets up and down the floor, which is the pace that obviously we've been talking about, wanting to play faster. He can fill that role. And I don't think he's a 30-minute a game guy. And I don't think we need anybody like that right now. But he definitely can be a rim protector. He can use his length to maybe clean up some defensive either lapses, or if we really want to pressure people more, to have somebody back there guarding the goal. I think he could be a key component more at the defensive end than the offensive end.
That's my thought on it too, Coach. Let me just give you all his numbers from last year. 3.6 points a game, 4.8 rebounds a game, but 2.8 blocks a game there, Coach, to your point. And that, by the way, is in just 18.8 minutes a game. And so, Coach, that number of blocks per game really jumps out at me. And, we've talked about that rim protection and looking at that. How do you balance? Like, is it like a platoon system you would employ with he and Jalen Washington? How do you go about like, hey, Onyenso, we need your defense in this game. Jay Wash, we need more. You're out. Like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, one of the things about tempo is people say, well, we want to play with tempo. I like to control tempo. It doesn't mean we necessarily play fast or play slow, but there are times when we want to play fast, and there are times when we want to play slow. I could see it be a type of situation where maybe with that starting group, it's more of a traditional, not walk the ball up the floor, but take chances to run when you have the opportunities to. But let's run some sets and let's really make sure we get good shots. Then when that second group gets in there, maybe that's when you turn up the defensive pressure. Maybe that's when you start to press a little bit full court. Maybe that's when you trap ball screens. Maybe that's when you really try to create some havoc with that second group. Coach John McClendon, longtime coach, long past now, but he was a kind of a guy I did some camps with right out of college, and he's a Hall of Fame coach, first African American coach to ever win an integrated national championship. But I learned some stuff from him, and he used to have a group called the Mighty Mites, where in his starting group was big, and then he'd throw in the Mighty Mites in the second group, and they would press like crazy and wear everybody's legs down, and then they put the big guys back in and play zone. I would love to see something like that, a philosophy where you're not just running one system. It's almost like a dual system based on personnel. But I could see something like that happening as well.
In that scenario, would you have Onyenso with that starting group and then bring Jay Wash in after that?
I would do just the opposite, I think.
Okay.
I think I'd have Jay Wash in the first group and then you use him in a second group to really create havoc. And again, not somebody you need to score, but having the options and maybe Cade Tyson's in that second group where he's more looking to score because you're going to need a different maybe scorer in that group. Of course, when you got RJ, he can be in both groups. He's going to play those 35 minutes, but he's got the ability to do both of those things. So it again creates a lot of different options based on how deep this team can be.
And obviously, we got to keep in mind, Onyenso started the year not healthy last year. He hadn't done a ton his freshman year. So, there are some worlds in which we don't fully know what he's capable of. I know he's trying, just from reading some of the things he's trying to do as he's being evaluated by the NBA personnel. He's trying to show off that he's got a little bit of a shot. I mean, at this point, he's literally attempted 1 3-pointer in his entire college career. So that's not his game. He's not a great free throw shooter, 58.8% last year. Honestly, didn't even scorch from 2, 55.9%, which is not bad, but it's not 60+% from 2 for a guy that you expect to be around the basket a lot. But so, Coach, what I think I would ask then is a lot of times with the modern big, you think about maybe a stretch guy, but there's also this version of the modern big that's like, hey, we don't really need you to do much offensively other than set high ball screens, rebound like crazy. And with North Carolina's backcourt and wing firepower, could that be enough with what Onyenso brings, or does that not give Carolina enough offensive firepower?
I think it's enough if he's playing 18 minutes a game. If he's playing 32 minutes a game, it's not enough. But I think in that role that, he's talking about that 15 to 20 minutes a game, run the floor, offensive rebounds, take care of offensive, defensive rebounding, just getting extra possession here too. He just has to give that energy, just provide that spark. I don't think it needs to be something where he's got to average 10 points a game. I would like to see his shooting percentage goes up because I don't think he's going to shoot a shot outside of where he can reach and touch the backboard. I mean, that's his range, so if he's shooting layups and dunks, I think that's really what he needs to do. Set hard screens, roll to the basket, look for second opportunities, and just be a big presence. And I think that would be very, very valuable to the squad that we have right now.
And I know he's not out here dunking everything like Cliff Omori from Rutgers is doing, but with a guy like Elliot Cadeau finding you, I mean, I got to feel like he would be able to thrive in that kind of role. So, Coach, I want to have a conversation here in a second about Jaylen Washington and what getting somebody like Onyenso will probably mean for his role in minutes next year. But I also want to ask you about, like, hey, if you're narrowing this down to Ven-Allen Lubin, Coleman Hawkins, and Onyenso, who would you go with if you had one choice I'm really curious to hear your answer to that. So I want to have that conversation, talk about Jay Wash. We'll do all that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Coach Rob, we just talked about Ugonna Onyenso, right? Well, FanDuel right now has Calipari specials. Whether or not Arkansas will win or lose when they go to Rep Arena this year. So right now at FanDuel, UK to win that game, minus 162. Arkansas to win that game, plus 125. I love how random and hilarious that is. Man, folks are in on anything. So if you want to get in on that Coach Cal special, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We've just been talking about Kentucky transfer big man Ugonna Onyenso, 6'11", 225, 2 years of eligibility remaining. Coach, we know, you and I talked about Coleman Hawkins and Ven-Allen Lubin last week. Lubin just finished up on Wednesday morning his visit to Chapel Hill. Obviously, we haven't heard word of any commit yet. To my best understanding, his camp has been pretty quiet throughout his process. That's his only visit so far. So it might just be like we don't know things yet. Obviously, Coleman Hawkins still going through the draft combine right now, so we don't expect to really hear anything on any of that yet. Coach, my hope has been, and I think it sounds like yours as well, that Carolina will use 2 of their remaining 3 scholarships. But we can also envision a world in which they would only use 1 of them and only have 11 of their 13 scholarships used and just roll with that. So, Coach, in a hypothetical world where Carolina was going to use 1 more scholarship and it was going to be one of these 3 young men, thinking about what they bring to the table, what their fit is, chemistry, all of these kind of things. If I only gave you 1 of these 3 guys, would you take Vanderbilt transfer Ven-Allen Lubin, Illinois transfer Coleman Hawkins, or Kentucky transfer Ugonna Onyenso?
This is why it's hard when we're on the outside, because we're not interviewing these guys. We can't look them in the face. We can't actually see them, all live on the court. I still think Coleman Hawkins is the most intriguing out of the 3. I think he's got the higher ceiling. I think he's got maybe a little bit more experience in a role where he's had a bigger role. So I kind of would lean that way. As an NAIA coach in my situation, if I have 3 scholarships left, I take all 3 of them. I mean, that's the easy answer for me, because we just don't get that kind of talent. If we can just bring in the most talented group and then let the guys fight it out during practice, that's the ultimate situation for it. I do think Coleman Hawkins is the best option right now. Lubin I think is the safe option. I think he's a solid guy. I think he's good. I think he's just a good guy. He seems like everybody likes him. I think he's a solid player. He doesn't bring any wow factor, in my opinion, right now. I mean, I think he's really solid. But he's not one of those guys when you say, hey, we got to throw the ball to him. He's not going to have the Sports Center highlights and things like that. But I do think he's a really solid option. I think he'd be really good with the guys that are around him right now. It's hard when you don't really get to know those guys and how they would mesh personally with the rest of the group.
Yeah, that's a great point. And especially right now in this weird period where there's some of the guys going to be out visiting home before summer session starts, you got all that. So it's like, how much of a chance did Lubin even have to interact with I know Cade Tyson is there now, so at least the 2 of them, but some of these other guys might be off and gone. Coach, I'm with you. As you said, obviously we don't know the fit and that kind of thing, but Coleman Hawkins, man, as I think the experience and the skill set that he brings would win the day for me in taking him over the other 2 if it was just 1.
Yep.
I know that he doesn't have the rim protection or defensive prowess of an Onyenso, but I think the critical thing here for me is the 3-point shooting, the free throw shooting. And it's not that he's a bad rebounder, 6.1 a game last year, 6.3 the year before. He gets over a steal a game. He even talked about on Wednesday after a great performance in the scrimmage game how much he loves to distribute the ball. Last year, averaged 2.7 assists. The year before that, 3. And so, but with what you said, Coach, about Onyenso not being a 30-minute a game guy, being more of a 15 to maybe 20. Last year, Coleman Hawkins averaged 31.6 minutes a game. The year before that, 32.5. And so I just think there are more pros that Coleman Hawkins has to his game that would help North Carolina. It's not that Onyenso and Lubin wouldn't. I think they both have things that would help. I just think Coleman Hawkins helps more.
I totally agree. And again, in this case, what are we looking for? We're not going to get an Armando. We're not going to be the same. That's one of the cool conversations I had with Hubert about a year and a half ago. Every year is different. Every team's different. Even when you have a high majority of the guys coming back after the run of the national tournament, 3 years ago, Hubert's first year, that second year, such a big core back, but yet the season's gonna be different. I think that was one of the things he had to learn as a young coach, that the years are not going to be the same. So we're not going to have Armando. We're not going to play that same way. So what's the best fit for the guys that we do have coming back? And I think it's really important. The personality and how they're going to mesh together, super important to Hubert and his staff. And that's something in those interviews and those times where you're just hanging out, eating a meal at having a burger or whatever. Those are the things that really come out strong. And I think Hubert's great at reading that. I think he's great at reading people. And, I think he's going to make sure he gets the right fit, not maybe just the best player.
Speaking of eating a burger, Coach, we talked about Whataburger last week. One of the 2 new ones here in my neck of the woods just opened this week. So sorry about you on that one. Now, Coach, you talk about all that, and it kind of leads us to a conversation of throughout this offseason, you and I have been of the opinion that Jaylen Washington would not, or perhaps should not, be the starting 5. Not that he doesn't have skills, not that he can't. It hasn't happened yet. And with his injury history, which thankfully we haven't had any hint or sniff of that lately, and I'll knock on wood as I say it. But Coach, I'm starting to read some writing on the wall where it appears that the coaching staff is going to need to depend on Jay Wash, perhaps more than we thought or expected. So, Coach, I want to frame it to you in a question from Austin Pierce on one of our live shows a couple weeks ago. He said, quote, "What can we realistically expect for the development of Jaylen Washington next year?" Where are you at with this, Coach?
As an NAI coach, used to playing fast because we don't get true bigs. If you have a 6'8" or bigger guy at our level, if he can play, he's going to go D2 or higher. That's just the reality of it. So we've got to play small. We've got to have maybe smaller guys play the 5. And who do we get beat by? We get beat by those guys that have a big that's just dominant, and we can't get that defensive rebound and get a stop. So that's why I think it is important that we find somebody big. I love Jay Washington. I think he's great. I just think that we've got to find somebody who can help us inside to finish those possessions. That's not who he is. He's not going to go out there and grab 15 rebounds a game. And I think that's why there's continued to search for somebody. I've never had a bad team that was a great rebounding team. And I don't see him as being a great rebounder. So I think we need to find somebody that can come in and be that dominant rebounder. And I just don't think we have it right now.
Interesting. I would tend to agree with that. And I obviously expect a jump and progression from him. I'm curious to see what exactly that is. I think it's confidence, hopefully some bulk. I can't wait to see what his listed weight is on the roster next year. But yeah, I mean, I know there is, Coach, you and I are both in the Discord all the time. We know that even in our own Locked On Discord Tar Heels community, there's a great big section of the populace that believes that Jaylen Washington can and should be the starting 5, right? Like that he will make that progression. And so, I would love to be wrong about that. But Coach, as we sit here today in the middle of May, unless there's a massive jump from Jay Wash, I still will feel more comfortable if there's somebody else in the starting lineup. But in the world that you proposed earlier, that could have Jay Washington in the starting lineup doing all those things. So we're going to have to wait and see what that is. All right, folks. Well, we've got Coach Rob, and that means we got to have some story time. We also want to talk about men's golf and celebrate them a little bit. So story time with Coach Rob coming up in just a second. For those of you who are new to the show since college basketball season, we haven't really been able to do many of our story times with Coach Rob because there's just been so many storylines that we've had as we've talked about the team and everything going on with roster construction now. And so you might not even be aware that a staple of our shows with Coach Rob is that segment 3, we do story time with Coach Rob. Why? Because Coach Rob, as I mentioned earlier in the show, is in the midst of writing a book about Carolina's summer basketball camp and all the wild and fun stories that go on with that. Coach is getting ready for it. We're almost to June in the summer. And so camp is upcoming there for Coach and all the guys in Chapel Hill. And so that'll be great. But Coach, we need to have some story time. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, we're exactly a month away from camp. So I'm really looking forward to it, getting excited. Camp time is always a wonderful time in the summer, but one of the things my buddies like to do at camp is they get pictures with all the guys or get autographs. And then, if RJ Davis has a big game, they'll post a picture of them and RJ on Facebook. And I've never liked to be that guy. I'm not judging them. I love it. I'm glad that they do it. But as a college coach and a head coach, I want to be part of the guys. I want to act like I've been there and be cool. And, but my son 1 year as a middle school kid couldn't come to camp. And he said, "Dad, give me some autographs." And trying to be a good dad, I got to get him some autographs. But I didn't want to be that guy to walk around and ask for autographs. So I bought a ball on Franklin Street, had an opportunity to, right after the team versus alumni game, I found Dewey Burke, and Dewey's just a good guy. And I said, "Hey, Dewey, would you mind doing me a big favor?" I said, "My son needs some autographs. Would you mind taking the ball into the locker room?" He said, "Yeah, no problem, Coach. Be glad to." So off he went, and I got a bunch of autographs on there, including Tyler Hansborough and Bobby Frazier, their best buddies down there. And we've got a Brian Reese autograph and some really cool ones on here. Just Danny Green's up at the top.
It looks like DG, yeah.
Yeah, so it was. It's one of those things where now my son's 29 years old and married with a kid, and he doesn't need the ball around anymore, so he ended up giving it back to me. So it's a really cool piece of memorabilia. I don't have a lot of autographs, but it was a great story because to be asked to do something uncomfortable, it's not something I wanted to do, but I'd do anything for my kids. So for Dewey to be able to do that for me, and I think he signed it right at the top too. He got the prime spot. So he must have signed it first, but it's one of those really cool things. But again, that's Carolina family. They had a table at that time in the locker room. They just put stuff on there, and every time the guys would walk by and see something that they hadn't signed yet, they would just kind of go down the line and sign everything. So, but a really cool piece of memorabilia for me.
Man, I love that, Coach. And what a neat, sometimes your stories are like these big, grandiose things that have happened or I love that this is just such a good reminder of just the basketball fans that are in all of us, the kid that's in all of us that just wants an autograph from a player they love, and so just a neat thing. And I love that you have it now, and that Will gave it back to you, and that's part of your story. I've got one behind me in my office, my setup in my office. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm in. When you see this background behind me, I'm at my house in a room. But when I'm in the other one, I've got all this memorabilia up behind me. And one of those is a ball, Coach. And I'm right with you. It's neat to just look at all the names and see that. So that's cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. It's just fun. And maybe I need to get some autographs this summer just with the new guys. But who knows?
There you go. But you'll have to you got to send somebody off to do it so that you don't have to be that guy again.
I'll get Paxton to do it. Paxton would do it for
me. There you go. Old Woj bomb. That'll be fun. Hey, before Coach and I get out of here, we do want to shout out the men's golf team that has been playing in the NCAA regionals, actually at home at Findlay Golf Course. First competitive action back going for Findlay. Basically, they just needed to finish in the top 5 over the course of 3 rounds of golf, 54 holes. They did that. They finished 3rd. Actually, Coach, I don't know if you'd seen this. Clemson was number 1. You know who was number 2?
No.
ETSU, baby, right there in your neck of the woods. So for those of you who don't know, East Tennessee State is minutes from Milligan and just right there. So pretty cool stuff. Way to go Bucks, right? And then Carolina was third, right behind ETSU, who was actually ETSU was ahead of Clemson, I think, going into the last hole. And there was a birdie and a bogey that flipped them and all that. But big congrats to Austin Greaser, who won the individual championship for this regional. So Greaser did a great job there. So what this means is Carolina now moves on to the national championship, which will be May 24th through 29th in Carlsbad, California. Great stuff there for the men's golf team, and we'll wait anxiously to see how they do. The women's golf team starts their national championship run, and we'll see how they do coming up. I believe it starts this weekend. I don't have that in my head right now. Coach, great stuff, great conversations. Really curious to see how things continue to unfold with the Tar Heels' pursuit of front court help. I'll be back with you tomorrow, folks, on Friday's show to wrap up the week. We're actually going to have a second show tomorrow where I have a conversation with Carolina baseball player Johnny Castagnazzi as they get ready for playing at Duke to wrap up the regular season this weekend. So that'll be good stuff as well. If you're not subscribed to the show on audio and video, please do that. It's easy to get in on. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, we would love to have you. It's free. It's easy to join. The link's in the show notes. You just click on it and come join us. Want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace and signed basketballs.